Daniel Myers hadn't planned on returning to Barlow National Forest. It just happened. One long, sleepless night in Portland led to a drive with no destination until muscle memory took over the steering wheel. Now, his old pickup sat half submerged in mist, parked just off the broken gravel trail that used to lead to one of the forgotten ranger paths. He stepped out, the cold biting through his jacket, and felt like he'd walked straight into the past. Everything was still, unnaturally still. Even the wind held its breath. The forest smelled like rot and time, heavy, almost sweet with decay. As Daniel slung his backpack over his shoulder, a sharp memory of his father flashed through his mind. A laugh echoing through these trees, the smell of campfire smoke in his beard. But that warmth quickly faded when he realized no birds were singing, not one. No rustle of squirrels or chirp of insects, just fog and silence so thick he could hear his heartbeat in his ear. Daniel walked for hours. The trail had all but vanished under years of moss and creeping roots. His boots left fresh impressions on untouched ground. Occasionally, he'd hear a distant snap or a shift in the brush, but nothing ever revealed itself. He passed what looked like the remnants of a ranger's outpost, a collapsed tower, rusted metal framework twisted into the earth like bones. It was near that ruin he saw the tracks. Not deer, not elk. These were massive, at least 10 inches long, 4 wide. The pressure of each print had cracked the soil beneath, like whatever made them was impossibly heavy. But what made his stomach twist was the spacing, too far apart for any 4-legged creature. They were bipedal, and worse, they were fresh. The edges were damp, not yet disturbed by wind or settling mist. Against his better judgment, Daniel knelt, tracing the grooves with his fingers. A chill zipped up his spine. These tracks led deeper, into an area no hiker dared go. He hesitated, then followed. As Daniel moved forward, the light dimmed unnaturally fast. It wasn't just the cloud cover. It felt like the trees themselves leaned closer, closing in. Fog hugged the ground in thick tendrils, curling around his ankles like claws. With every step, that oppressive silence grew heavier, until even his own footsteps seemed muted. It was as if the forest was swallowing sound. Then came the feeling, that primal back-of-the-neck prickle, the one that told your ancestors a predator was near. He paused, scanning the trees. Nothing. But then he moved again, and behind him, something moved too. He whipped around. Nothing. He stood perfectly still, holding his breath. A slow rustle, barely audible, came from his left, then another from behind. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he didn't, not yet, because a part of him knew if he ran now, it would chase. The fog parted, almost intentionally, revealing a dark silhouette tucked between dense pine trees. A cabin, old and battered, yet somehow intact. Daniel had no memory of it from past visits. It stood crooked on one side, roof dipped like it had bowed to something heavier than snow. Every board groaned in the windless air. He approached carefully, the crunch of leaves underfoot feeling too loud. The door creaked open with an almost theatrical whine. Inside, the air was sour and dense, like something had died long ago and hadn't quite finished decaying. Dust floated thick, but the fireplace looked oddly maintained. He moved slowly, eyeing the walls, and that's when he saw the gashes. Not carved, not scratched by knives or animals. These marks were ripped into the wood, deep furrows, claw width, carved in arcs that spoke of panic and violence. Something had tried to claw its way out. Daniel backed away slowly, his pulse thudding against his ribs like it wanted out too. Nightfall came fast, faster than it should have. One moment, a grey sky. The next, black. Daniel had blocked the door with a heavy cabinet and lit a fire that barely warmed his skin. He sat cross-legged on the creaky floorboards, clutching his knife, ears twitching at every sound. The forest was screaming with silence again, until it wasn't. At first it was subtle, a thud beneath him, then a faint drag, then scratching, not loud, not frantic, slow, methodical, like claws dragging wood grain over and over. He dropped to the floor, pressing his ear to the boards, every muscle clenched. Something alive was down there. He whispered to himself, "No, no, no, no." The scratching paused. Silence. Then, thud. The floor shuddered beneath him. He scrambled away, backing toward the corner, knife raised, heart racing. Whatever was beneath that cabin, it knew he was there. By dawn, Daniel had had enough. He didn't care where the truck was. He needed out. He kicked down the door, stumbling into the mist. But the forest had changed. It was no longer passive. It watched. Trees bore claw marks at shoulder height. Trunks dripped with something dark, sticky. He touched one out of instinct. Blood. It smelled wrong, like metal and rot. And then he saw the deer. Or what had been a deer. Its head was missing. Legs mangled. Entrails strung over a branch like grotesque tinsel. Daniel stumbled backward, bile rising in his throat. That's when the sound returned. Breathing. Wet, ragged breathing. Behind him. He turned slowly, heart hammering in his throat. A shape stood half hidden in fog. Taller than any man, covered in matted fur. Long arms, eyes like burning coals. And its grin, stretched too wide. Teeth like broken glass. He blinked, and it was gone. He ran for hours, muscles burning, lungs screaming, and just as he collapsed in exhaustion, he fell into a clearing. A campfire flickered weakly, and beside it sat a man in a faded ranger jacket, staring into the flames like he hadn't moved in years. Daniel crawled closer, half dragging himself. "You saw it," the man said without looking up. His voice was coarse, like he hadn't spoken in a long time. "Didn't you?" Daniel could barely nod. "What is it?" he croaked. The man sighed, tossing a carved wooden creature into the fire. It sizzled. An old hunger. This forest belonged to it long before we carved trails through it. We forgot the stories, but it didn't forget us. Daniel asked, "Can I leave?" The man looked at him then, and there was something hollow in his gaze. "You can, but it marked you. It doesn't stop because you leave." Daniel made it out. He walked for 2 days until he reached a highway, flagged down a truck, and never looked back. But the forest didn't leave him. His dreams were filled with fog and claws. His walls creaked at night. His apartment stank faintly of wet fur. Friends said he'd changed. Jumpy, haunted. One night, he heard scratching. Not outside. From inside the walls. He tore them open. Nothing. Another night, he saw movement in the mirror. Just behind him. A flicker of glowing red. He turned. Empty room. But then he noticed his bathroom window was open. He never opened that window. And on the sill, a muddy, clawed footprint. I ran. God help me, I ran like a madman, through the trees, through the fog, barely knowing where I was going. Every snapped twig behind me sounded like thunder. I don't know how long I ran, only that I stumbled into the arms of a state ranger hours later, babbling and half frozen. They said I'd been missing for 2 days. They found no trace of the workers, not a single body. Just the clawed-up radio tower and blood on the fog-wet grass. They chalked it up to a bear attack, a rogue grizzly, but I know better. I saw its eyes. I felt its breath. That wasn't a bear. It was something older, something that lives in the silence, in the fog, waiting. I woke up to nightfall. The fog had thickened. I stepped out of the bunker cautiously, heart pounding. The entire camp looked abandoned. The cabins were open, lights still on but flickering, swaying gently like someone or something had passed through recently. I started toward the radio tower again, thinking maybe, just maybe, I could send a flare or reset something. But I stopped dead in my tracks. There it was, at the edge of the fog, watching me. Massive, low to the ground, its outline hunched and bristling, eyes like wet coals glowing faintly. It didn't move. Neither did I. My legs were jelly, my throat locked. It blinked once, then it disappeared back into the mist like it had never been there. Panic set in. We split up like idiots, some wanting to flee, others wanting to hide. I chose to barricade myself in the supply bunker. The door was thick steel. It felt safe until the breathing started. Deep, slow, right outside the vent shaft. I held my breath for over a minute, listening to something sniffing around like it could smell me through the metal. Then came the dragging again. Slow, patient. It circled the bunker 3 times, then silence. That silence was worse than the noise. At least with noise, I knew where it was. But silence, it meant it could be anywhere, everywhere. I gripped a wrench like it would make a difference and waited. Every second stretched into an hour. At some point, I must have passed out from fear. By evening, we'd sealed the cabins and tried calling for help. No signal, not even static. The site radio, which had worked fine the day before, now emitted nothing but silence. No crackle, no hum, like the frequency itself had died. Mark tried climbing the short tower to reset the repeater. He never made it halfway. We found his body just past the utility shed, throat torn wide open, not bitten, torn, with force that could only come from something massive. But there were no signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds. His face was frozen in horror, mouth wide, eyes gone. Whatever had taken him hadn't done it for food. It had done it for the kill. By noon, 2 men were missing. One was the mechanic. The other was a cook who'd gone to fetch water from a nearby creek. Both paths led into the forest. Neither returned. What scared us the most wasn't the disappearances. It was what we found just beyond the fog line. Massive tracks. At first glance, they looked like bear prints, but deeper, wider, as if the creature that made them had weight and intelligence. I crouched beside one print and snapped a photo. When I looked at it through my phone screen, I noticed something I hadn't with my eyes. Claw marks, clean and deliberate, not from slippage but intentional dragging, as if whatever made them wanted us to follow, or wanted us to fear what was ahead. I looked up and swore I saw something shift in the fog, something low, watching. I was up before sunrise, couldn't shake the unease. I needed to walk it off, clear my head. That's when I saw the first blood trail. It started near the edge of the compound and vanished into the mist. Bright red against the grey mud, still wet. I called out instinctively, "Hello?" then instantly regretted it. The fog seemed to swallow my voice whole. Nothing answered, not even an echo. The scream came maybe 10 minutes later. It wasn't human. It started like one, raw, panicked, but warped into something feral, something dying. Every person in the camp froze. I watched Mark drop his coffee. We didn't even speak. We just stood there, listening to the sound echo through the trees, until it finally stopped, or was stopped. It was Mark, the youngest of the security crew, who first told me about the missing dog. "Used to bark at every damn squirrel," he said, rubbing his hands together like he was cold despite the warm layers. Then 2 nights ago, nothing, just silence. Next morning, gone. I asked if they'd searched. He just nodded toward the tree line. "You don't go into that fog unless you're an idiot. Or suicidal." They'd found something near the edge though. Not the dog, just its collar. Torn, bent metal, covered in something dark that wasn't rust. I remember feeling a weird chill crawl up my spine, like I was standing too close to an electric fence. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing faint rustles outside, like something was dragging itself through the wet brush. The worst part, no footsteps, just that heavy, slow dragging sound, like claws across gravel. I swear it wasn't even supposed to be a trip. Just a short, work-related stopover at a remote logging facility in northern Montana. 3 days tops. The plan was simple. Meet the site manager, inspect the new security equipment, and fly back to Denver. I had no reason to suspect that the woods beyond the camp held anything more than foxes or the odd black bear. But from the moment the fog rolled in that morning, something felt off. It wasn't the natural kind of quiet. It was suffocating, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. I stepped out of the prefab cabin they'd set me up in, one of 5 scattered across the muddy compound, and instantly felt like I was being watched. The fog blurred the tree line into shadowy shapes that didn't quite stand still. There were no bird calls, no insects. Even the usual chatter from the chainsaws and workers had dulled into a distant hum, as if the forest had swallowed the sound whole. I remember mumbling to myself, "Jesus, it's like the place is mourning something." That was my first warning. I didn't listen. The first thing that struck me about the invitation was how out of the blue it was. After 20 years of no contact, Ethan called me like we had spoken just last week. "It's been too long, man," he'd said with that same rough laughter I remembered from our college hiking trips. "Come out to the Smokies, got a little cabin, a couple of days to unwind, just you and me. No wives, no jobs, no bullshit." I hesitated, of course. Life had taken me in another direction. Suburbia, kids, a desk job. But something in his voice pulled me in. A chance to remember who I used to be. So, I packed light, left my phone mostly off, and drove 6 hours into the mountains of Tennessee. The fog was already thick by the time I reached the narrow gravel path that led up to the old ranger station turned cabin. And when I saw Ethan waving from the porch, beer in hand, I smiled in spite of myself. We were middle-aged now, but that old fire hadn't quite died. That first night we drank too much. The fireplace crackled while we caught up, talked about old hikes, old girlfriends, things we missed and things we didn't. Ethan looked tired though. Not just tired, haunted almost. When I asked about it, he shook his head. Weird shit's been happening, he finally said. Tracks, noises. I thought maybe a bear at first, but it doesn't move like a bear. I laughed it off like anyone would. What, you think Bigfoot's out there? But Ethan didn't laugh. You'll see. Stay till morning. You'll hear it too. I didn't sleep well. Around 3 a.m. I heard something. Not loud, just off. A dragging sound, then a low, wet snort. I thought it might be the wind until something knocked over the metal trash can outside. I sat up, pulse racing, and waited. Silence. Then, another soft knock, like claws on wood. I didn't look out the window. I didn't want to know. Morning came slow and grey. Fog hung low across the trees, giving the world a surreal, dreamlike tone. Ethan was already outside, crouched by the side of the cabin. Come here, he said quietly. I joined him. In the mud were prints, not bear, not cat. Something wrong. 4 toes, long, deep claws. The stride was too wide for any dog or coyote. I squatted down, touching the edge of one. Still fresh. Ethan looked at me, his face drawn. I told you. We grabbed the old rifles from the storage closet and spent the day boarding up the windows and clearing the trail around the cabin. Neither of us said it, but I could feel it in my bones. Something was watching us. I'd glance at the trees and feel like eyes had just vanished behind bark and branches. By dusk, the wind picked up and the fog rolled in thicker than before. That night, the knocking came again, but this time it wasn't on the wall, it was on the doors. We sat frozen, rifles in hand, as the sound came again. Tap, 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 like claws tapping gently. A low growl followed, deep and unnatural. Then silence. I don't know how long we waited. Minutes, hours. I must have dozed off because I woke up to a sharp crack. Glass breaking from the back window. We moved slowly, hearts pounding. Ethan signaled with his hand and we crept toward the rear of the cabin. The window was shattered, and outside, something moved through the fog. Large, low to the ground, but fast. I swear I saw yellow eyes, unblinking. We stayed up until dawn, barely breathing. Whatever it was, it didn't come back, but it had found a way in. Ethan paced for most of the morning, muttering. It's not alone, he said. I think there's more. That evening, we set a trap. Raw meat tied to a tree with a motion sensor camera. It was primitive, but it was all we had. Just before midnight, the alarm tripped. We ran out, rifles ready. The meat was gone, the tree clawed up, deep gouges through bark and into the wood itself. But no blood, no prints. Just that same heavy silence, broken only by my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Back inside, the camera footage left us both stunned. At first, nothing, then a shape, hulking, hunched, skin like wet leather, its head jerked toward the lens. The eyes weren't eyes, just 2 black pits. It moved in jerks, unnatural, and then in a flash, it was gone, like it had vanished into thin air. I felt sick. We're not dealing with an animal, I whispered. This isn't something that belongs here. Ethan wanted to stay. Said he had to see it through, but I couldn't. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for us to let our guard down. By noon, I packed my things. The fog hadn't lifted, not even a little. Ethan stood on the porch, staring into the trees. "You leave now, you won't make it," he warned. "It waits in the fog." I didn't listen. The road out was barely visible. I kept my headlights on low, crawling forward. Then I saw it, not in front, but beside me, running parallel to the car. I couldn't believe the speed. It moved like a shadow, but I felt the weight of it pounding through the underbrush. Then, it was gone. I didn't stop driving until I hit the highway. Weeks passed. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe it? I kept the footage. I watch it sometimes, late at night, hoping it'll seem fake. 2 nights ago, I got a voicemail from Ethan, just breathing. Then, his voice. It got inside. "Don't come back." I tried calling back. No answer. I contacted local authorities. They found the cabin burned to the ground. No sign of Ethan. Just deep gouges in the trees around it. Sometimes, when the fog rolls in thick over the yard, I hear that same dragging sound. I close all the windows, I keep the lights on, and I never ever look outside.